In July 1941, a German armored column rolled toward a quiet Ukrainian village. There were no soldiers left to stop it, no defenses, no artillery, no reinforcements coming. The Red Army was collapsing, entire divisions were surrendering by the hundreds of thousands. And this village, like 1,000 others across Ukraine, was simply waiting to be overrun. Except for one man. A farmer, a mechanic, a man who had never commanded a single soldier in his life. He looked at what he had, a broken-down agricultural tractor, scrap iron, boilerplate steel, and 6 terrified neighbors, and he made a decision that defied every reasonable calculation of survival. He was going to build a tank, and he was going to hold that road. What happened over the next 72 hours shocked even the Germans, who later photographed the wreckage. One enemy soldier wrote in his diary that whoever built this machine had, and I quote, "more courage than sense, and perhaps more sense than we gave credit for." This is the story of Semyon Konstantinov, the farmer who welded himself into history. When Operation Barbarossa began on June 22, 1941, Semyon Konstantinov was not a soldier. He was repairing tractors, and within weeks, the war came to him. To understand what that meant, you need to feel the scale of what was happening across the Soviet Union in those first weeks. 3 German army groups had struck simultaneously along a 2,900-kilometer front. 3.8 million men, 3,600 tanks, nearly 2,700 aircraft. It was the largest military operation in human history. And in the opening days, it tore through Soviet defenses like paper. By early July, Panzer Divisions were advancing up to 50 kilometers a day. Entire Soviet armies, not battalions, not regiments, entire armies were being encircled and destroyed before they could react. The Kiev military district, which covered Konstantinov's region of Poltava Oblast, was hemorrhaging men and equipment at a rate that headquarters could not even accurately track. Supply lines snapped, radio contact failed, units dissolved into the countryside. Villages like Staryi Myrhorod went from being 40 kilometers behind the front line to being the front line almost overnight.
Semyon Konstantinov was 38 years old. He had served briefly as a mechanic in the Red Army during the 1920s, but for the past decade his world was Kolkhoz number 14, Collective Farm number 14, outside Staryi Myrhorod. He knew every bolt, every bearing, every failure point of the Stalinets 60 agricultural crawler tractor. A 9.5-ton machine, slow and ungainly, built to drag plows through Ukrainian black soil. It had never been built to stop a German armored car. On the night of July 12, 1941, a Red Army lieutenant stumbled into the Kolkhoz. His unit was gone, shattered somewhere north of Kremenchuk. He was filthy, exhausted, and carrying the only things he had left: a Degtyarev DP-27 light machine gun, 1 rifle, and a warning. German reconnaissance elements, advanced scouts of the 16th Panzer Division, were probing southward. They would reach the road junction at the edge of the village within 48 hours. Then the lieutenant moved on. He had somewhere to be, somewhere further from the Germans. Konstantinov watched him go, and then he turned back toward the machine shed. He had an idea, a desperate, probably suicidal idea, but an idea nonetheless. He gathered 5 men before dawn: Grigory, a welder; Vasil, a blacksmith; 2 farmhands, Pavel and Dmitro, who had no particular skills except that they showed up when asked; and Alexei, his teenage nephew, assigned to keep watch from the oak tree at the northern edge of the farm. He told them what he was going to do. Nobody laughed. Nobody left.
That alone says something about the kind of fear that was moving across Ukraine in the summer of 1941. They had 31 hours before the Germans arrived. Konstantinov stripped the Stalinet 60 of every agricultural fitting, the plow hitches, the seed drill mounts, all of it gone. Then he and Grigory began welding. 8mm boiler steel, salvaged from a damaged grain drying facility nearby, went up around the cab and engine housing in overlapping plates. It was not tank armor. It was not close to tank armor. Against a heavy machine gun at close range, it would fail. But at an angle, at distance, against rifle fire, it might be enough to keep a man alive inside it. Vasil fashioned a pivot mount for the DP-27 machine gun above the cab, improvised from a harvesting crane arm, bent and recut by hand. They cut firing slits with a hand grinder, sparks showering into the darkness. They doubled the front plate at the bow, 2 layers of steel welded together, creating something that functioned, crudely, like a glacis plate. Alexei packed the interior floor with sandbags hauled from an irrigation ditch 200 meters away, one trip at a time, throughout the night. By the afternoon of July 13th, what sat in the machine shed was not a tank. But it was armored, it was armed, and it could move. If the armor failed under fire, and it very well might, the men inside would have no way out before the heat reached the fuel line. They knew that. They got in anyway. Konstantinov named it the only way a mechanic would, practically, without ceremony. Железный byk, the Iron Bull. The morning of July 14th arrived cold and gray, mist sitting low across the fields north of the junction. Alexei, up in his oak tree before first light, heard them before he saw them, the distinctive crackle of motorcycle engines. He counted carefully, the way Konstantinov had told him to. 9 motorcycles. Zundab KS-750s, German reconnaissance bikes with sidecar-mounted MG-34 machine guns, moving south in column formation at moderate speed. They were not moving cautiously. They had no reason to be. In this part of Ukraine, in these first weeks of Barbarossa, there was almost never anyone left to fight. Alexei dropped from the tree and ran. Inside the Iron Bull, positioned hull down in the drainage ditch behind a collapsed stone wall at the junction, nobody spoke. Konstantinov's hands were on the controls. Grigory crouched behind the DP-27, eye to the sight. Pavel and Dmitro pressed their Mosin Nagant rifles to the firing slits. Vasil, who had no weapon, sat with a hand axe across his knees and said nothing. The motorcycles came around the shallow bend at 300 meters. Grigory opened fire. Short, controlled bursts, exactly as Konstantinov had drilled into him, conserving ammunition they could not replace. The lead motorcycle cartwheeled across the road in a spray of sparks and steam. The column collapsed into the ditches on either side. German rifle fire cracked back immediately, rounds sparking and whining off the angled bow plate, finding no purchase. The sidecar MG-34 swung toward them and hammered a long burst. Steel rang. Nothing penetrated. 11 minutes later, the German reconnaissance element pulled back north. 4 casualties. The Iron Bull had taken 0 penetrating hits. Konstantinov said nothing for a long moment. Then, they'll come back with something heavier. He was already right. At 1340 hours, 2 SDKFZ-222 armored cars rolled into view from the north. 4-wheeled, fast, and carrying 20mm KWK-30 autocannons. A 20mm round will punch through 20mm of steel at 100 meters. Konstantinov's boilerplate was 8mm. If those guns got close and got a clean angle, the Iron Bull was finished. The men inside it were finished. He did not sit still and wait for that to happen. He drove straight at them. 6 kilometers per hour,
A crawl, an agonizing, rattling crawl. The iron bull lurched out from behind the wall and rolled directly down the road at the lead armored car. Doubled bow plate forward, forcing the German gunner to engage a moving target at close range on a road flanked by ditches that would swallow the armored car's wheels if it tried to maneuver. The first 20mm burst struck the left track housing, skipped upward. No penetration. The second burst hit the bow at an acute angle, deflected. No penetration. Grigory, jolted and thrown by the rough ground, found his aim for one moment and put a burst through the open commander's hatch. One man down. The armored car threw itself into reverse, misjudged the ditch edge, and stuck fast, one rear wheel spinning in open air. The second SDKFZ-222 looked at the stuck car, looked at the iron bull still grinding toward it, and reversed out of the lane. For the second time in one day, 6 men in a welded farm tractor had held a German armored force at a Ukrainian road junction. That night, they repaired a cracked weld by firelight, their last welding rods. The kolkhoz women brought black bread and cold beet soup. Vasil produced a small bottle of horilka he had been saving since his daughter's wedding. It went around the crew once. Nobody slept. To the north, engine sounds moved in the darkness. July 15th, Day 2. The Germans did not make the same mistake a third time. At 0615 hours, before full daylight, 2 forces moved simultaneously. From the north, on the main road, a full platoon of Panzer Grenadier Infantry from Regiment 64, and behind them, a Panzer II, a real tank. A 20mm autocannon, coaxial machine gun, and unlike the armored cars, this machine could leave the road. It could go around the Iron Bull. It could hit the thinner side plates. It could circle, probe, attack from any angle it chose. From the east, along a farm track barely visible in the mist, a 12-man infantry section was already moving to flank the position. 2 directions, simultaneously, and Konstantinov had 6 men. He sat in the cab and thought for exactly the amount of time he could afford, which was not long. Then he turned to Pavel and Dmitro. He told them to take their rifles and go east. Make noise, fire everything, shout, throw what you have. Make 12 German soldiers believe they are facing something much larger than 2 men with bolt-action rifles. Then he turned back to face the tank. Pavel later said he was certain he was walking to his death, that he had accepted it somewhere between the machine shed and the tree line. Dmitro, a father of 3, said he thought about his children for a moment. Just a moment. Then he thought about what would happen to them if the junction fell and the road opened up, and he kept walking. 2 men against 12. Not to win, just to buy time. They opened fire at the tree line. They shouted. They moved laterally, firing from different positions to suggest multiple defenders. The German flanking section halted, took cover, waited for information about what was ahead of them. They waited 40 minutes. 40 minutes. Back at the junction, Konstantinov drove the Iron Bull into the road and stopped it sideways across the only firm surface the Panzer II could use without bogging into the summer-soft earth on either side of the lane. Not a weapon, a physical obstacle. A roadblock made of 9.5 tons of farm machinery and boilerplate that the tank would have to push through or go around, and going around meant the ditch. The Panzer II's commander assessed the situation. A blocking vehicle of unclear type, uncertain flanking reports, soft ground on both sides, infantry behind him. He halted, called for support. Those 40 minutes bled away. And in those 40 minutes, 12 men of the 297th Rifle Division, remnants of a shattered regiment retreating south, reached the junction. They carried one Maxim heavy machine gun and a PTRS-41 anti-tank rifle. The Panzer II's commander, now looking at an anti-tank rifle in addition to the blocking obstacle, made a new calculation. He withdrew. The Iron Bull had held. Again. By the morning of July 16th, the Iron Bull was barely holding together. A cracked weld had opened along the starboard side plate. Grigory had patched it twice, then run out of rod. The left track was making a grinding noise that Konstantinov did not like. Inside the cab, the smell of hot metal and unwashed men and fear had become something almost physical. The crew inside, even less intact than the machine. 3 days of no real sleep, constant readiness. The particular exhaustion that comes not from physical effort, but from hours spent waiting to find out if the next sound means you were going to die. And then the mortars arrived. The German force that came on July 16th was not probing anymore. A full section of Panzer Grenadiers, covered by an 81mm mortar team positioned out of the Iron Bull's sight line, began walking rounds toward the junction with the methodical patience of men who no longer needed to hurry. The first 2 shells landed short. The third landed close enough to rock the vehicle. The fourth landed directly on the left track assembly. The drive sprocket shattered. The Iron Bull shuddered and went still. Konstantinov ordered the crew out, immediately, under fire. He was the last to leave. Grigory later said he called back, told Konstantinov to come now. They had to go now. Konstantinov's voice came back from inside the cab, calm, almost businesslike. He was removing the DP-27. He was taking the ammunition. He emerged from the motionless vehicle, walking, not running, the machine gun across his shoulder. He turned south with the others and did not look back. The Iron Bull sat alone at the junction, smoke rising from the track housing, motionless at last. When German soldiers reached it, they gathered around it and photographed it. Some could not immediately identify what they were looking at. Was it a military vehicle? A prototype? Something from a factory they hadn't encountered? Eventually, someone found the welds, the boilerplate, the farming crane arm that held the machine gun mount, and one German soldier opened his diary and wrote what he saw. An armored agricultural vehicle. Whoever built it had more courage than sense, and perhaps more sense than we gave credit for. All 6 men walked out. Pavel, shot through the shoulder, walked out. Dmitro, a graze along the side of his head, blood soaking his collar, walked out. The father of 3 made it home. On July 17th, Semyon Konstantinov presented himself to the commanding officer of a Red Army rifle regiment south of the Vorskla River. He carried the DP-27 across his back. He gave the officer a precise account of the junction's terrain, the approach routes, the ditch positions, the soft ground on the eastern flank. He was useful immediately. The 72-hour delay Konstantinov's crew created was not enormous by the scale of Barbarossa, but it allowed elements of 2 broken Soviet regiments to cross the Vorskla River before the German reconnaissance pushed through. Hundreds of men who might have been encircled found a corridor. Some of those men fought all the way to Berlin. In September 1941, the Soviet state awarded Konstantinov the Medal za Odvagu, the Medal for Courage. The citation described him as having organized and commanded an improvised defensive position using locally constructed armored equipment, delaying enemy forces and enabling the withdrawal of Soviet personnel. For a military citation, it was almost an understatement. He served the rest of the war as a mechanic and technical advisor with armored repair units. He had a gift for making broken things work, which the Red Army needed desperately in 1941. He survived to 1945. He lived quietly in Poltava until his death in 1978. The Iron Bull was never recovered. The Germans likely cleared the wreck from the road.
It was consumed, as millions of machines were consumed by a war that had no particular interest in preserving monuments. But here is what cannot be consumed. History remembers generals. It remembers the grand movements of armies, the turning points of campaigns, the names carved on monuments. But sometimes it is held together by men no one expected. A farmer at a road junction in Ukraine with 6 men, boilerplate steel, and a tractor engine. No orders, no training, no certainty that any of it would work. Just the refusal to simply wait and be overrun. 1 machine, 6 men, 72 hours.
And the quiet, stubborn decision that it was enough. Stories like this were never meant to survive. They happened in places no correspondent reached. They were recorded in no official communique. They exist in a testimony here, a diary entry there, a citation buried in a Soviet archive for decades. But they happened. Subscribe to our YouTube channel, America and World War II Stories, because the next story we uncover might be even harder to believe than this one.